Hello, good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of Daily Record Hotline Live. I'm myself, Keith Jackson. I'm joined here in Daily Record HQ by Gavin Berry and my wee pal. He's decided not to come in tonight, Scott McDermott. I don't know what's up with him. He's probably just jealous, Gav, that me and you have got the studio. I don't know what his problem is.
I'd love to sit
Scotty,
there with you, but Jacko, you'll be fed up looking at me over the next few days anyway, so it's probably better. I'm here.
how could anybody get fed up with that wee face? Listen, and by the way, right, I've already sorted out. Scotty and I are a wee romantic Indian for two in Lisbon's best Indian restaurant, apparently. Gav.
All the way to Lisbon, you get an Indian. Come on.
Well, it turns out that I met somebody in my holidays who has travelled extensively and said that this is one of the top places. And when we were in Garmisch, we started to make a wee habit. We found a lovely wee Indian restaurant there. So that's the plan. Anyway, enough about our personal bromance and world tour. Scott, it's been another eventful day. I was down at Hampden today speaking to Steve Clarke, Andy Robertson. As Scotland look forward to the start of this really potentially difficult Nations League campaign. First ever attempt at the top flight, and we'll come to that in a bit. But I think, Gavin, at the top of the show, not that long ago before we come on, it was confirmed that Rangers season ticket holders are facing a little bit more upheaval. You want to talk us through it?
Yeah, well, there was a raft of live fixtures announced, but actually this morning, Keith, on the Record Sport website, we actually broke this story. My colleague Ross Pilcher had said there was a bit of the SPFL had a bit of a headache with this game. Rangers St Johnstone on October the 6th. Of course, Rangers playing the Europa League against Lyon a few days earlier. The game, therefore, has to go from the Saturday to the Sunday. But the Great Scottish Run taking place on the Sunday, which was causing a problem because obviously policing and traffic and all the logistical issues that would go with it. So the solution, as we wrote this morning, was going to be 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock. It's turned out they've gone for 8 o'clock. So fans inconvenienced again. Away fans as well, of course. I mean, we'll talk about the Rangers.
Right, St Johnstone fans facing getting back at midnight.
Sunday, getting back at midnight. Of course, we've got all the issues with Sunday service and travel. So the St Johnstone fans are being put out. But I mean, if you're a Rangers season ticket holder, I mean, this season
at the end of your tether,
it's been a nightmare between going to Hampden.
See, the thing is with that. What happened to the SPFL supercomputer? The one that sorts everything out. You'd think a red flag might have come up.
That's one of the things. I mean, they put all these things into the system, don't they? It's like, you can't have a game on that day and these teams can't be at home. Surely you go to Glasgow City Council before you're doing this. What events have you got on in the Glasgow area that might cause us problems? And say, well, we've got the Great Scottish Run. That might cause you a few issues. And of course, the Great Scottish Run is on the Sunday. Only Rangers out of the two Old Firm clubs could have possibly played on the Sunday because they were in Champions League qualifiers. If they dropped out, which we all know was a distinct possibility, then they would go into the Europa League, which involved Thursday games.
It's all if, buts and maybe.
Yes.
But let me add another if, but, or maybe in there. What if the game's not going ahead at Ibrox? Because, and I'll tell you for why, right? And I'm not saying this is what is going to happen, but what I will say is from conversations that I've had earlier today, Hampden is not off the table for that game. That game against St John, whether or not it goes ahead at Ibrox or at Hampden, is irrelevant. It will be Sunday. An 8 p.m. kick-off on the Sunday night. But as far as I'm led to believe, it is not. There is no concrete commitment yet to that game going ahead at Ibrox. The reason being, I'm told that Rangers have got to accommodate their season ticket holders. The Dundee game, they are going back to Ibrox on the 21st of September for the first time, but that's not in the season book. That's there's a cup quarter final, and they can play that in front of 3 stands and accommodate who they think needs to be accommodated. If, however, a safety certificate is not passed for the game against Hibs and then subsequent games, be that St Johnstone, whatever other ones, there is this still live possibility the Rangers might be going back to Ibrox for one game and then going back to Hampden. So, I mean, Scott, is that not going to be sort of straw that breaks the camel's back a little bit if that does turn out to be the case? Because there is no commitment right now, and Rangers haven't confirmed that even the Hibs game will go ahead at Ibrox and that's for obvious reasons. They can't do that until they get the all relevant safety certificate stamped by the City Council.
Well, it could well be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Just listening to you two there, getting over it all. I mean, what an absolute shambles. I mean, without getting over all ground, this obviously goes back to the summer, the start of the season, the renovation works that Rangers were getting done at Ibrox. I mean, the board, listen, we've said it a million times, this should just never have been allowed to happen. This situation should never have been allowed to develop. And I know at the time, Rangers were quick to say, "Oh, heads have rolled and somebody's lost their job over it." But my God, I mean, I think more than one person should maybe be worried about their job after this.
Well, somebody else did leave their position, but they just went to an even better paying one in Saudi Arabia.
But do you know one of the things? One of the things I was thinking today. I know obviously it was the whole thing about the steel being delayed. Coming from the Far East. One of the things I was thinking today was, see, even if everything was in time and all that, could this possibly have been ready? How could Rangers played their last home game against, was it Dundee in May?
That's right.
And for that work to have been completed and all the relevant safety certificates that you're talking about to been signed off for them to start in August. I mean, even if everything was on schedule,
which it never is. Yeah.
do you think there's any way that would have, how they could have had that all completed in that time?
How they decided that they were going to take that risk? I mean,
Right, yeah.
This season of all seasons, after what had gone on before, we talk about the rebuild, the playing squad. You've got the revamped Champions League where the money goes up again, so these qualifiers are coming early in the campaign. Philippe Clement's trying to build a new team, and you take this risk. And they must have known it was a risk in terms of the
600 extra seats.
I mean, honestly,
honestly,
it's not just for the extra seats, though. I mean, it's to allow the
better facilities for the table fans, which is admirable. But
it's not just increased capacity. So I mean, it is for that, which has been
but it does seem like quite an expensive solution to a problem that might have been easier to fix if it was to provide disabled fans with better facilities. It seems to me of a whiff of a vanity project about it, is what I'm saying. And the problem that you've got there is if you've got a chief executive in place who's telling you in writing to the board and putting it in writing to the board as late as the end of May that everything's going ahead as scheduled and will be completed on time. It's difficult for the board to turn around and say, well, question the guy. Project manager is the chief executive. It's an employee. So, whether or not it's the right decision, and I think we've all agreed at various points throughout the process that it was entirely the wrong decision to make James Bisgrove the chief executive. It's difficult to criticise the board for actually believing what they're being told by a paid executive. So,
see, Jacko, see if what you're saying is right about potentially the St Johnstone game having to go to Hampden, and it's only because the Dundee game's a cup tie. I mean, is there any point?
The Hibs won first, Scott, wouldn't it? It'd be the Hibs won first.
Right. But is there any point in chopping and changing? Do you know what I mean? If
to go back for 1 year.
Just to go back. I mean, I think that would almost frustrate fans more, having to go back to Ibrox and start Hampden.
Scott,
I'm sure that Rangers are moving heaven and earth to try and make sure that it's not one game only. I'm sure that they have this plan and that they're throwing everything at making sure that they get everyone signed off and all the safety certificates passed so that they are able to open all 4 stands. I just, at this minute in time, all I can tell you is that that's not guaranteed. And if it's not guaranteed, then they've got a problem because they'll have more season ticket holders than they've got seats. And at that point, you either look at refunding fans that can't get into their own seats, or you have to take the game back to Hampden.
And I know you're saying fans, Scott, and you're right, fans are obviously being inconvenienced, but I mean, the players as well. I know you'll say, oh, well, they're professional and just get on with it, but the bottom line is they are human beings,
and these players don't need any more excuses.
Well, sorry, that's what you're giving the excuses, because that's what one of the options today that was subsequently knocked down by the SPFL. But at one point, they said one of the solutions to the St Johnstone game was that they might just reverse the fixture, and Rangers would just go to McDermott Park on that weekend.
But that's been turned down.
But that didn't come about. But at the time when that was a solution, I think, imagine Rangers in the state they are now, the vulnerable state, the fragile state that they're in, going up to McDermott Park on a Sunday. You could just see it, be a bit like last season when they went to Dens Park. You know, the game kept getting postponed, and then they ended up dropping 2 points. You just thought, if they end up going up there when they should have been at home, they'll end up drawing again. You know what I mean?
It's a soap opera, isn't it, Scott?
You've hit the nail on the head about the excuses. As I say, that this this squad, off the back of those Celtic winning 3 titles in a row, I mean, everything had to be perfect for Clement and this Rangers team and the club getting into this season. So for this to happen, and as you say, give them such an easy excuse, I mean, it feels, I know it probably hasn't, but it feels like it's already been kind of rolled out. No, I've heard everybody saying about the negative perception. Even the manager spoke about it last week. A big party it's Hampden. So already, I mean, they're already talking about it. I mean, we're barely out August, and already the manager's talking about there's a real negative vibe around the club and party. It's because of the stadium. So that just feeds into the whole thing. And listen, punters, and they drew away Hearts at Tynecastle, knocked out the Champions League. Punters looking at the makeup and the profile of the squad, people were saying it just feels like the season's a write-off, even in August. And I just think this stadium thing, and even...
And that's history repeating, is it not? It's just a different... It's just a more dramatic explosion this time, this year. Whereas, it was the same under Michael Beale a year ago. The season was falling to bits before the end of the first month as well. But they've just found more implausible ways of creating the problems and setting themselves on fire this time. It's but listen, and it's never ending, so I'm sure we'll be coming back to it. In terms of, before we go and deal with Scotland, there was news across the city at Celtic today as well. Obviously they had to confirm their 25-man squad, Gav, for the Champions League. There's no great shocks. I can tell that you're looking at me as if you've been caught by surprise.
I was caught by surprise because it was announced as I was coming out of the train.
There's no great shocks. All the new signings are in. The 3 keepers that you would expect. Yang has managed to make the squad. Adam Montgomery's made the squad. It's just about everybody you expect. What it says to me is, Scott, when you look at the players that are in there now, it really looks like a squad that is, not saying capable of ripping up trees in the Champions League, but it's got quality. It's got a depth of quality that wasn't there 12 months ago, and that's what Brendan Rodgers was crying out for all along.
Yeah, you're right. It does look strong. Even when you see it in paper, as you see, even the squad guys, as well as the new guys that have been brought in. When you look down, I'm particularly pleased for Luke McCowan, obviously, getting his dream move.
Yeah, brilliant.
As if it wasn't good enough. He gets his debut. He gets the move late on, gets his debut in the Old Firm win. And then for him, I mean, thinking where he was 2-3 years, I mean, he was at Ayr United 3 or 4 years ago. I think Greg Taylor said the other day he was a lifeguard 9 years ago. So for him to see his name in that Champions League list and be looking forward to those kind of games, it's absolutely brilliant. And listen, it looks as if he'll settle into it and deal with it, no bother. And he's surrounded by, as you say, when you look at that squad, he's surrounded by real quality, especially in midfield.
You can see the quality of the squad and the depth of the squad combined with the draw itself, which everyone sort of agreed was favourable, could have been a lot worse, has changed the mood amongst the Celtic fans, because there've been so many disappointments in Europe.
And disappointments in the transfer market.
So to get the two together, and that probably brings a different kind of pressure, because even the fixtures have fallen their way. When we were on the Hotline Live the night of the draw, I remember saying to Daniel Corr, the fixtures are going to be really interesting here.
Daniel who? Who's he? Who's that wee guy?
Take a well-earned break.
Ran it. He's left me having to do this.
At the anchor.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, slang. No. The fixtures, as long as the fixtures are good, and of course home to Slovan Bratislava, perfect start. But there's going to be so much pressure on that because they've got to get off to the fast start. I saw somebody joking the other day because Slovan Bratislava lost 5-0 in the league win at the weekend, and I saw a Celtic comment underneath it saying it's going to be a toxic atmosphere and we draw 0-0 in that opener. So all good humour, but that's what you mean with the pressure that comes.
Yeah,
and I think they feel. Sorry, Jack. I think they feel that they can get through. I mean, I know this new format. You need to be a Philadelphia lawyer to work out like, who's going through and who's going where. But I think with the new format, Celtic fans are looking at the squad, looking at the fixture, and thinking we can actually progress for this. Can get through.
There's a chance to win some games, get some points in the bank, and yes, there is a chance to progress. I just think though that the crucial part from Celtic's point of view is that Brendan Rodgers has spent the last, I don't know, however long, 15 months or so, screaming for quality.
Yeah.
He's eventually got his way.
Yeah.
And because of that, you can now see a set of circumstances where they've got enough quality to replace 2 and 3 players at a time, be it from weekends to midweek.
Yeah.
And the actual standard of the team that he's putting out in the pitch won't be significantly decreased as it was previously.
No, definitely.
And you know, I think I spoke with Craig Swan about it. There was one point last season where they had a Champions League game in the midweek. Then when Hibs almost put out the same starting 11, dropped points, everybody's knackered. That's not going to happen this year because it's going to be so much easier for him to dip players in and out when they need a rest and not worry that the standard's going to collapse when he does that.
Yeah.
And the kind of perfect kind of illustration of that was Matt O'Reilly for the first Old Firm game of the season, and everybody would have forgotten that he was even there because of the standard of performance.
Yeah, and Paulo Bernardo.
Everything you've said, Jacko, is especially true if there are so many points clear in the league. I mean, we spoke last night about the next Premiership weekend, Celtic potentially going 8 clear. Rangers, I think you're right. Honestly, I think come these Champions League games, if Celtic are 8, maybe even 10 points clear of Rangers. I know Aberdeen are in the mix as well, but I genuinely think Brendan Rodgers will be looking at that squad thinking, with all due respect, league games, especially at home, I think that's when you'll see like Luke McCowan and Valle and Ida and Bernardo and people like that, because I think he'll have the luxury of leaving Hatate, Kyogo, people like that out the team for the Champions League.
But I mean, if you actually rewind to day one with Brendan Rodgers, he did put on record his ambition was to come here to do something in Europe, and I think that's what frustrated him was, unless you give me the proper tools to do that, then I'm going to fall short on the promise that I made to the Celtic supporters on my first day. So I think it was critical in order for him to try and land a few blows in Europe, but also stay on top and in control of stuff domestically. He needed that extra quality. The squad isn't bloated anymore.
No.
You're looking through that 25-man squad. There's still room for an Adam Montgomery, but the level of player is, as opposed to a gap from your first 11 to a bunch of fringe guys that might be projects, and it now feels a lot closer together. And I think that bodes well for Celtic this season.
I mean, I was reading Gordon Strachan saying that, and he's right in what he said, probably more so in the old format. I know with the new format it's more difficult to work out, but he says you need a scout, you need a biggie. When he got to the last 16 twice, they beat AC Milan at home and they beat Man U at home. Brendan Rodgers hasn't really had that statement one, has he? I mean, he beat Feyenoord last season, but it was a dead rubber. He's not that real biggie, and I think he's got to produce that.
Well, that would certainly light a fire under this campaign if he manages to get it. Anyway, away from Celtic and Rangers just now, because on the other side of Glasgow, well, not really the other side, because Rangers have been playing there as well. But I was over at Hampden today to see Steve Clarke and Andy Robertson for the start of this Nations League campaign. We should be massively excited about it because this is our first, ever crack at the top level in European football. It couldn't get any higher. We're in Pot A Group 1. Or it's not even that, is it? It's Group A1, I think is the correct terminology. So it should be a moment of real excitement.
I know.
And it just doesn't feel like it, does it?
It's just that lingering. I mean, it's a bit like when we're talking about Rangers earlier on. I think that lingering disappointment of the way last season ended. They didn't seem to shake it off during the summer, and I feel even when they started this season, that hangover was there. You just feel as if there's that air of negativity around, just from the way that the qualifying, they obviously the first half of the qualifying campaign was so good,
Blistering.
and then went nosedived, and then the Euros obviously huge disappointment, and it's just hard to shake it off.
Listen, it's been a bad year. I think you can trace it back to when we lost to Spain in Seville in October, so nearly exactly a year ago.
Yeah.
And at that point, we were flying. And on that night, it was superb. It was a superb Scotland performance.
Yeah.
The very least we deserved to take out of that game was a draw. And I was there, and I was absolutely devastated that Scott McTominay's free kick didn't stand. I felt we got a real rough end of the stick that night. And it was just another level of the progression of that side.
Yeah.
But since that night, gradually, not so gradually probably, we started to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
And that led us right into the Euros. And look, do you know what? Let's hear from Steve Clarke, because we were over speaking to him today. Let's hear what he's got to say. And let's see if you can detect what I detect, Scott.
Steve, I was saying to Andy that under you, Scotland have become a team that gets to tournaments, that is now in the top tier of the Nations League. As manager, how do you then get the squad to compete at that higher level to get you the kind of results and success that you want, given that the bar's been raised?
Looking for the fact that you qualify. You get there the first time, we didn't do what we wanted to do. You get there the second time, we didn't do what you want to do. So you have to keep looking to get there. And you have to target the glass ceiling and say, no Scottish team's ever done it. Probably a little bit more quality when we get to that level, when you're playing against opponents of the level that we played against in the summer. When we play against the opponents of the level that we're going to play against now in the Nations League. So it's slowly trying to find a formula that will break the glass ceiling.
In terms of breaking that glass ceiling, managers always like their teams to evolve and improve. Can we expect a different Scotland, a more attacking Scotland? What can we expect, albeit you're clearly playing very good teams, all of whom are ranked much higher than Scotland? How do you square that circle, if you like?
Evolution. You used the word yourself. It's evolution, not revolution. Obviously this time we have a significant number of injuries that has probably impacted my squad selection a little bit, which means that I've had to dip down into Scott's under-21 squad probably too many times, if we're being honest, because the under-21s also have a couple of very important fixtures coming up. But that brings its own freshness. It's important, and I've mentioned it before, is that we respect the core group that have managed to qualify for back-to-back European tournaments. But then within that core group, you have to try and add a little bit more, and hopefully we can add something that makes us better. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen across the two games that we're going to play now. But I'm looking at this campaign in the Nations League and thinking this is the chance to try and evolve the group so that when we do get to the World Cup qualifiers, we're in a better shape, ready to go again, and ready to qualify for our third tournament out of 4.
That last point, Steve, is that something that you came away from the Euros with? You know, the squad has been together for 2 campaigns already. Do you feel that it maybe needed a freshness just to lift everyone going into a new campaign? How necessary was the injection of youth or new faces or whatnot into this squad?
I think it was something I touched on before we actually went to the tournament, that we knew that coming out the other side that there would need to be a little bit of freshness in the squad. I didn't envisage so many injury issues, so many call-offs, but that's given us a freshness that's maybe more than would have been if it had everybody fit and available, but still a nice freshness. And for the young boys who've come into the squad, they've brought that enthusiasm and that breath of fresh air that galvanise and give the senior players a little bit more life. So it's been a good couple of days, but we want to make it better.
Scott.
Yep.
I gave you a little question, a little bit of homework there before that. What did you notice, or what do you notice from Steve Clarke that represents a change from the Steve Clarke that we were dealing with going into the Euros?
Well, I think he's more open to change for a start. Whether that means young players, new players, whatever. But for that press conference today, the main thing I took from it is that he feels, I think deep down he feels that we could get a couple of downs in this Nations League as well. And he's trying to obviously square that off by saying we can almost use this to get the squad ready for the World Cup qualifiers. But the big worry for him is as manager that if he gets off to a couple of bad results in this Nations League, as Gav touched on about the hangover for the Euros, these fans, I think the Scotland fans, they are so angry, so disappointed with how the summer went. I think they're ready to pounce if these games, if they don't see anything in these two games starting on Thursday night.
Well, here's one from Stephen Johnson. The powers that be should take a punt on Neil Lennon, a controversial figure and charismatic character, but knows the game outside in and a motivator of players. He goes on, we are going nowhere fast, and we had a Euro disaster last campaign under Steve Clarke. So, that is, I'm not saying it's just one opinion, one version of the present status. But I do get the feeling that there's a bit of unrest. And what I was asking and what I was trying to get at with you, Scott, is I actually detect a change in Steve Clarke. And I'm not sure it's one that will be necessarily to the betterment of the situation. I think I can start to feel the drawbridge coming up a little bit in terms of his relationships with the media. I think that he's a little bit more spiky. Look, the guys at home probably don't care so much about this, but I think it's still interesting and worthy of noting that up until this double header, every kind of dealing that the media ever had with Steve Clarke up until this point, there would always be a separate broadcast press conference where the broadcasters go in, the cameras and the mics and all that, and they sit and they do their bit. And the written press were then afforded a sit down with them, which was a lot more relaxed, more informal, cup of tea, kind of time for a bit of banter, off the record stuff, and just a bounce about. But then you get on with doing your interviews, and it was always very accommodating. I find it interesting that he's come back from the Euros, and one of the first things that he's done is to put it all in one. It's an all-in-one now. There is no accommodation for the written press. That strikes to me as if that's a man who feels a bit bruised at some of the criticism that he's received since the Euros. And I find that strange as well, because I don't think that Steve Clarke was really... I can remember one or two pieces, a column here or there, where it was pretty savage. But I think for the vast majority of it, it was all fairly understanding. There was a lot of people in our business that were upset that we didn't take the handbrake off. And I think there was some criticism, and I wrote a column in which I said, this has to improve. But I did say that Steve Clarke has got just enough credit in the bank now to be honest with us. And if he comes back and says, look, do you know what? I've given us some thinking time. I still believe I can move this on. I can still progress this squad. Then there's an onus on us to say, yep, Steve, well, do you know what? You've earned the trust of the nation. Let's go, give it one last go. Now, I hope that's the case, but I'm starting to see signs with Steve Clarke, and I hope it doesn't become this, because I've been in the movie too many times with too many Scotland managers. When things start to go wrong, there's a breakdown in relations and a breakdown in trust between the media. It becomes like, they become a bit entrenched. And I can think of examples like Craig Levein. It became horrible towards the end. I hope this isn't the start of this with Steve Clarke, because I wouldn't like it to end in a bad way, given everything he's done. And the reason that I say all that is, Scott, you're absolutely right. See, when you look at the fixtures he's got coming up, these are nightmarish. And it's on the back of a calendar year which hasn't gone at all well in terms of results. I think we've got 1-1, and that was Malta.
Yeah.
Gibraltar,
no?
Sorry, Gibraltar.
Gibraltar friendly. And even that was
great. And now we've got to embark on this top tier of the Nations League. Yeah. And you're looking at it going, if you're being really honest, you look at it and go, Thursday night's game against Poland at home at Hampden is probably the most winnable game that we're going to get out of all six. And even that is far from a sure thing. Yeah. So if I'm Steve Clarke, am I looking at this thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get out of this intact? Do you see that, Scott? Do you see?
Listen, he's already said, first of all, that the World Cup campaign will be his last. I mean, he was clear about that last week. So this is his last crack at it. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that in terms of I don't know how players would feel about that. I don't know what that does in general for the camp when he basically sat last week. He was asked, did he ever think about quitting? And if no, why not? He says, well, I've got a contract, so I'll be here, and I'll be here at the end of my deal. I don't know. It just seemed a bit cold, and I'm not sure what that. I don't know what that does for the group. And in terms of him, saying that he's earned one last crack at it, I agree with you, Jack. I said this at the weekend. I agree. He has earned the right, because after 20 odd years of not getting to tournaments,
he took us to two.
For him to come in and get us to two tournaments, I think exceeded all our expectations. So you're right, he has got credit in the bank, and he has earned the right to get a crack at this World Cup. But what I would say is, I don't know if that will be up to him, because we know that the SFA, whether it be Ian Maxwell, Mike Mulroney, they want to keep Steve Clarke. He's their man. They believe in him. He's brought this success of two straight Euros to the country, as I say, when it wasn't really expected. However, if we go out and get beat off Poland on Thursday, and there's punters leaving, I don't know if Hampden will be full in any case, but if there's punters leaving with 20 minutes to go because you're getting beat, then you go to Lisbon. We'll be there on Sunday, arguably the toughest game of the section, and you get another defeat, and suddenly it's 1-1 and 14. I don't know if it'll be Steve Clarke's choice to make whether he starts the World Cup campaign.
Well, look, if we're all agreed, and I think we are, that Poland at home is the most manageable match of the six, then if we only take a point from that, or what if we don't take a point from I mean, there is the potential here for this to be a campaign of suffering.
Definitely.
And at that point, does Steve Clarke, would the Tartan Army engage? Will they still get behind him for World Cup qualification campaign? I think these are tricky times. I think these are really dangerous waters. Another thing that I'll say is Andy Robertson said to us today that during discussions with Steve Clarke after Germany, they identified one or two things that they felt they wouldn't do again were they going into a tournament. And one of those things that came up in the conversation, which I think they both agreed on, was the fixture list was wrong heading into Germany 2024. They gave themselves too many big games against big opposition, and it killed the momentum that Scotland had been building. And it probably really badly affected the confidence of the players who felt they belonged at that level and then were made to think again before they went into the tournament. Now, that's all well and good. But I then said to Steve Clarke, Steve, Andy had mentioned all this, you do realise you're about to enter into another run of games against some really big nations, which looks remarkably similar and might be even more punishing.
Although, I was actually going to say to you when you were talking about that earlier, actually, I think the group could have been, I think the draw could have been worse.
It could have been worse.
I think actually for bearing in mind we knew we were going to be in with all the heavyweights, I think it's not a bad draw. And Poland at home should be seen as a good opportunity. They're in the same situation as us. They only took 1 point from the Euros. Their manager's feeling a bit of pressure.
They're the worst Euros than us.
Yeah, they don't have a keeper. He's just retired, Chesney out the blue. So their manager's saying they don't actually have a number one. He didn't know who the number one was yet.
Lewandowski's still up front. By the way, so
he's still up front. Yeah,
Lewandowski, Ronaldo, and Modric. We're basically playing the still game cast here. We can't get through this group. It's a disgrace.
So I think actually it should be an opportunity tomorrow. We shouldn't be fearing this game as much as we seem to be. But that's
wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't
it be nice if we get a lift again? If we return to the sort of form that qualified us.
I mean, you could flip it, but that's why, because we're saying, Poland aren't maybe not the great force that we fear they once were, that if you don't get a result and it is a draw, or even worse, you do think, where do you go from there?
Here you go, latest comment. Andy Mackay, thanks Steve Clarke for ruining the Scotland feel-good factor with that embarrassment in Germany. Andy goes on, I'm closing my curtains for a couple of weeks, see you when the domestic stuff starts again.
That's the problem. This is the issue that he's got. I mean,
That's-
the atmosphere tomorrow night will be fascinating because you know the kind of travelling support that Poland will bring. You'll probably have 10,000 of them bouncing about.
That's the point. I mean, how good would it have been getting into this Nations League? Think of the feel-good factor we had after beating Spain and qualifying and all that. I mean, just to have some of that still left over for the Euros, if we just had a decent Euros.
Yeah, it did what some of the other smaller nations did there.
Right, exactly. They could have come into the Nations League campaign and almost just enjoyed it. No, went for teams. If you pick up a point or a win or that, I think punters would have just enjoyed it. And as Steve Clarke was saying there, it would have been an ideal opportunity to blood Max Johnson and Ben Doak and just bleed a couple of these young guys into it to get them ready for the World Cup qualifying campaign. But unfortunately for him, because of that horrific run, and you touched on it with the decision to play those high-profile friendlies, which absolutely killed the confidence and killed the momentum, then has a disastrous Euros. I don't think getting into this Nations League campaign he can really afford to.
You'll probably have to go with tried and tested. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
So you'll probably end up with Lyndon Dykes leading the line again, and that'll probably lead to more shrugs and shoulders and groans. And,
Yeah.
I mean, there you've got here Joe Lanigan, incredible entitlement from Clarke the other week, followed by more nonsense from his sidekick John Carver, and saying he's not had one person stop him in the street to say the Euros left him disappointed. Maybe it's because he lives in Newcastle, which is a fair point from Joe, to be fair. Why, aye, big man, you're doing a great job.
That was an interesting one. That was an interesting comment. I think the only person I must have spoken to was Steve Clarke.
Listen, the fans are going to turn up on Thursday. I don't know about you, but I think Tartan Army's going to turn up on Thursday, almost sitting with their arms folded, just waiting for something to happen, waiting to be entertained, almost just looking for payback for the suffering that they had during the summer. And if that doesn't happen,
we need a spark.
Yeah.
We need something to lift the spirits again and start building momentum again. I just worry that this company that we're in might be a little bit too talented for us to find that. And he has got a cautious side.
Yeah.
See if we were going in against, I know we played Finland before we went to the Euros and it wasn't great. But see if it was that level, then you could go out and you could probably think that Clarke would take a risk on, let's start Bendo, let's see what he can do.
Yeah.
But because this is the one game in this group that he probably thinks I've got a decent chance of a good performance, it might encourage him to be cautious again. And I don't think that's what the Tartan Army want to see.
No, definitely not. And just on what you were saying earlier, Keith, about, that kind of spiky and the change in the press conference, when I watched the video today of, obviously there was a story come out saying that Shea Adams had chosen not to come, that he was fully fit, but had maybe asked not to be part of the squad, and he was shooting that down, wasn't he, in the press conference? But he just seemed to get very defensive on it all, and it was like, I'll show you the email if you want. I've got an email from Torino, because I think the story says he wanted more time to settle in Italy, and
it feeds into this narrative that people don't want to be there anymore. That people have lost the love and that connection and the club spirit. Now you've got guys pulling out because I want to settle into my new house.
That'll be a telltale sign right away if Clarke is losing it a wee bit. That faith that the players had in him, if people start pulling out. When Steve Clarke came into the job, that was a big problem for Scotland. Too many guys pulling out. Since he took the job, we've hardly had any call-offs. I mean, that's been the beauty of his reign, is that he's had his strongest squad pretty much all the time, apart from serious injuries. I mean, you had guys like Lyndon Dykes, who was injured even turning up for the Euros and going to the stuff like that. That's the kind of feel that was within that squad. I think it'll be really interesting in the next couple of months, between obviously this international break and then October, to see how many people pull out and how many people aren't there. And that would be a worry if that starts to happen. That's a serious.
I think we'll finish off here, lads, with many people might look at this and it is inconvenient, and the domestic season just got up and running, as one of the callers was saying, or one of the viewers was saying there. And so it does feel, here we go. That's a bad feeling, because remember that Scotland managed to break that cycle.
Totally.
Where it was, it's brilliant, it's international break, because you were really buzzing for it, and the whole country was up for it.
Yeah.
I think this makes this game so interesting,
Yeah.
because it feels like an inconvenience. It feels like something we could all do without right now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if on Friday morning the buzz is back?
Oh yeah.
And you're thinking I thoroughly enjoyed watching
Yeah.
that last night. By the way, Ben Dolt's going to be an absolute world beater.
Absolutely.
And Steve Clarke's taking the handbrake off that team.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need from tomorrow night. And I do think more of the same is going to turn more and more people away.
I agree, but listen, I says to you last night, Jack, I mean, on Thursday night, I would start Max Johnson, Ben Doak and Ryan Gould in the starting 11, but I'm pretty certain Steve Clarke won't do that. I'd be surprised. I think he might go with Max Johnson at right back instead of Anthony Ralston, but apart from that, I think it'll be pretty much the same kind of look as we had in the Euros, obviously without Adams.
Are you expecting radical changes, or are you expecting?
No, I agree with Scott. I don't think he will. But the other one that we've not even mentioned, and of course, this is through no fault of his own, is Callum McGregor, of course, retiring. I mean, what a blow that is from him. And that's where you do sympathise, to lose a player of that quality. And he's not someone who has chucked it because of the manager. I mean, that's clearly he's made a decision. He sat down and thought that one through. That's a huge blow.
Yeah.
No?
Well,
No?
who knows what fed into the decision-making process? If you're Callum McGregor, you might be looking at going, I could play at a World Cup. I don't think so. I don't think there's a disconnect between Steve Clarke and the players. I'd be astonished if that's the case. I actually believe him about Shea Adams. I believe that there probably is an injury there. I certainly believe that Torino have told him it's an injury. I don't think we're at the state or anywhere close to of a dressing room revolt where Steve Clarke is concerned. But I do think there's an onus now on the manager to freshen it up and try and give the public something different and kind of a shot in the arm and a little bit of hope to believe that, do you know what? If we do manage to qualify, be it the next World Cup or the next Euros, that by the time we get there, we're going to have a team that is capable of going and having a go and, throwing a few punches and not just cowering for cover the way we have done in the last two.
Yeah.
But, that's just me, and I've probably gone off on a rant there. So we'll be back here tomorrow night before kick-off. Hopefully we'll get an idea of the team by then, and we can see whether Scott's right and he's gone ultra cautious, or if he's answered my prayers and taken the handbrake off. But either way, we'll find out. The next 24 hours will be interesting, and you can catch up with it all in tomorrow's newspaper, across all our socials. And please keep your comments coming in, because we love to hear from you. Keep the arguments coming, the debates coming, and we'll be back here and we'll do it all again, same place tomorrow night. Good night.
So